It's time to head into 2023 with a blast through the Ardennes Mountains. For one final time, the drivers in this US Open will be IndyCar Series are ready to rumble on the road at Spa-Francorchamps. Hello everyone and welcome back to Friday Night Primetime. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, alongside with Cam Roger and Andrew Kinsella for the final time in 2022. Cam, of course, we've seen some fascinating races already so far. Tires going to be maybe the most talked about thing in terms of strategy here today, but it's a classic venue which always delivers great racing.
Yes, it certainly does, and a great way to end 2022 indeed. It's certainly a very well-used track. All the drivers are going to know exactly what they're doing around, but of course, a slightly different challenge, bringing over the North American style of racing to the Ardennes Forest. So really looking forward to how this race is going to go, and of course, strategy is going to be the big talking point.
Andrew, of course, you're here alongside because, like me, your commentary journey started because of this series and because of these cars. Of course, tomorrow you'll be part of our send-off for the US 500. Today is going to be slightly different, though, here on the road courses.
Absolutely, and I must say it is a little bit emotional bringing this, at least part of this journey, to an end in the broadcasting perspective for me, at least for now, because, as you say, it was my first time commentating was on these Indy cars, so it's a little bit sad to see them go, but we've got this send-off today, and as you say, one final send-off tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to being a participant in both of them.
So let's talk about what's coming up after this as well. We'll focus on that a little bit more at the end. Don't forget that next time out, a week from today, IMSA back on your screens with that BMW M V8 hybrid, the LMDH, slightly different start time, and of course we'll talk to you more about that at the very end. Here though, a longish sort of a race, and for the first time in quite a while for some of these drivers, Cam, not a one-stop race, but a two-stop race. It does mean that, of course, with two tire compounds, they've got a little bit more flexibility, but like I mentioned, with long straights and fast sweeping corners, this is definitely a track that demands the most out of a setup to get the best balance on tires.
Yeah, some very high speed and medium speed corners around this track. So you've got to be having the stability in the car and, of course, keeping the tyres in check for the full stint. A couple of weeks ago at Road America, we saw a very interesting strategy. We saw drivers trying to use maybe the alternates in the middle part of the race, try and get some speed at that point. Maybe not working out in that occasion, but maybe today it will with how things will work out as we get the first couple of qualifying laps in. So certainly the strategy is the main thing that they're going to be focusing on, is how they focus that to really be fast in those final couple of laps and start attacking when all the gloves are off.
Yeah, and we're kind of already seeing that right now in terms of the fact that, well, blocker Carrie Welker, one lap and done in qualifying. Does not seem as though you're going to get the opportunity on tires to sweep around for another long lap. Phil Kraus will run his way through the bus stop chicane with blocker, Lyon, and Carrie, the top three, 4/10 covering them for the time being. 2022 Lionheart IndyCar Series champion thinks that's not good enough. He's not going to get a chance to go again. Phil Kraus will have it all to do from the back of the field, Andrew.
Yeah, a little bit of a mistake there from Phil Kraus, and as you say, the tire strategy is going to be so important here today. Just not only is this a long track, Arjuna, but it's also a very fast track, and because it's such a high-speed facility, it puts a lot of heat into the tires, and those red tires are just going to melt away for these drivers, as you see all of them basically only doing one lap here.
Here comes Chef Robert Malechka. Can he avoid an off-track through the final corner, which is what I think caught Phil Kraus out after making his way around the entirety of the lap. Track limits, also something we can touch on once we get into the race itself, but number 16 for Powerslide Motorsports across the line. So I think actually start a flying lap in the case of Rob Malechka down through La Source and in towards the fearsome Eau Rouge then Radion. Cold tires, lap number one, going to be treacherous for the drivers, but over the top of the hill, Malechka looking nice and tidy. I'll correct myself. I'll give myself some commentators' excuses because the racing driver excuses will come out. 4 o'clock in the morning, one-stop race indicated rather than two stops. But I think with the red tires being as bad as they are, maybe the rumbling I heard was we'd see some two stops. Just look at how loose that car was through the Lacombe chicane, though. That's something that these drivers will be balancing through the course of the race here today, Cam.
Yeah, it's yeah, you're right. The rear tyres is something that you're going to have to think about. There's a lot of the times where you have to lean on the tyres and to sort of control the temperatures of them, especially is what is most important. You've got to just have that bit of finesse about you, especially coming through corner as well. When you start to push, you really push on that rear right tyre. And around here, even though it's actually a clockwise circuit, there's quite a few important left-handers such as Perron and the exit of the Fanny chicane here as well. You've really got to use that rear right tyre. So sometimes the right-sided tyres here can actually be just as much of a pain as the left as well. And of course, Malechka doing a good job on the oval speedway last time out, only losing to Phil Crass by 1,000th of a second. Can he go one better today?
It's going to be up to the top for Christian Hildegard in second with a blistering lap time from him. One other consideration that setup builders have at a track like this, of course, is that well, traditionally you'd throw as much downforce onto these cars as possible with these long straights. Compromises will be made through the course of the field. Malechka will be one of the final cars across the line, and as he builds his way up into third, it's a great lap time from Robert Malechka, and this is what we've seen from him since joining Powerslide Motorsports, Andrew. Of course, us both being teammates with Rob. He's got speed on the road courses as well.
Yes, he absolutely does, particularly in qualifying. He has that power to pull out a lap and really surprise some people. He's still working on his race pace just a little bit, keeping that consistency lap to lap, but he's shown some marked improvements over the course of the Lionheart Series, especially from where he started to where he finished the season, duking it out with Phil Kraus there at Phillip Island for a while for one. It's been a joy to watch him sort of get his handle on these road courses.
Qualifying in the books for the final time for many of these drivers in 2022, but we're ready to go racing. And it'll be the #1 car of Adam Blocker that leads us to the green for 21 laps in the Ardennes Mountains. It's a 1:53.863 that gets him pole position. Hildegard alongside with just over 1/10 of a second splitting him. Malechka and Lyon third and fourth with Brian Carey, and Kevin Burrell in his new Indy Alliance Racing colors sharing row #3. Back in 7th spot, it will be Adam Crane for the Satellite Racing team, with Rashad Craig in green and white alongside Nico Yarva and Jesper Orman make up the top 10, with Jacob Reed and Mitch Welker sharing row 6. Welker with some work to do. Opportunity for some alternate tire strategies, you would have to think. 13th sees the New York native Andrew Marquez in the Graphics LC Esports and Skowers car. Seb Alexander alongside with Lorenzo Bonda, RaceSpot's own 15th. Olivia Haywood and Chris Wilhite making up the field of 17 Dallara IR18s ready to rumble in the mountains. Expectations then, Cam, as we get ready to go racing. We've talked about the fact that there's going to be some of these different tire calls, and we're already seeing that play out as drivers make their way down to the starting grid. Most of the drivers starting on the primary black harder compound of tire.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the favourable option, just because you can have that extra speed at the end and you can have a little bit more control of how far you go into the race to balance out the stints. Of course, all expecting the primaries to go a lot longer than the alternates over the course of the race. So do look the drivers to go well over half distance, of course, before we start seeing those tyres. But that's going to be obviously the big factor of how hard you push now to get the track position that you may have lost in qualifying, or do you save the tyres a little bit and try and have a shorter stint with alternates at the end to have a much faster race car? So the drivers do need to be quite sort of mentally thinking with how this race goes out. Of course, the slipstream can be a big factor with where you are in a certain battle, but sometimes you might see drivers backing out just to keep the flow of the battle going.
And I mentioned the setup compromise you might make with downforce, Andrew. One thing that's going to play into the minds is lots of cloud cover and cool track conditions here at Spa.
Yeah, so this is certainly going to favor those drivers on that lower downforce setup. I suspect that you're going to see a number of teams who have multiple setups here. They're flipping to the lower downforce setup with the cloud cover here, and they would have done it just before the qualifying or just before the race started. So it'll be a little bit of an adjustment period on this first lap, and as we know, turn 1 here at Spa, it's always treacherous, and it's particularly treacherous in these Indy cars with the rolling start that we have.
And with cold tires as well. Only 2 drivers in the top 10 electing to start on the softer alternate compound. Christian Hildegard and Adam Crane will be trying to put the pressure onto the rest of the top 10. But Adam Blocker powers out of the bus stop chicane and gets the field underway for the US Open Wheel B IndyCar Series finale for 2022 here at Spa-Francorchamps. Down into turn number 1, side by side with Will Lyon trying to get to the inside of Brian Carey. Hildegard already bullied down to 3rd position, but as we swarm down the hill, Robert Malechka and Adam Blocker, teammates side by side. Blocker gives up the run on the climb up towards Radion, but now the run down to the Kemmel will see drivers use that push to pass, and who will lead at the end of the straight? Cam.
And Hildegard there coming up the run towards Lecon, trying to get on the inside there. Malechka with a great start, of course, the push pass coming into play, and Blocker already down into 3rd place. And side by side further back as well, drivers trying to work their way into a single file rhythm, as we see in the back end here of the top 10 still going side by side.
That was Mitch Welker, I think, trying to get around Rashad Craig, who had a slightly poor start, just like with Hildegard, who maybe initially got caught out. Craig sliding backwards, Blocker with a big lockup down in through Bruxelles, but able to hang on to it. Malechka taking advantage of the track limits down through No Name Corner. You can see just how much they're pushing already, and I think Malechka's got the bit between his teeth. He's got Hildegard behind him on the alternate compound of tires. And Andrew, if I'm being honest, if I'm Malechka, why not hang behind Hildegard at the end of this opening lap and see if you can break away, because you can see Crane and Carey side by side still.
Well, I think that is a valid strategy. If I'm Malechka, I'm going to try and keep Hildegard behind me for as long as possible. Make Hildegard use up the best part of his red tires. That'll make holding on to him as he gets in front of me a little bit easier. So if I'm Malechka, I'm going to hold him up probably for about a lap and a half, maybe 2 laps.
Adam Crane on the push to pass and past Brian Carey. Think Mitch Welker and Seb Alexander have come to blows. Welker's dropped to 18th. Alexander is back in pit lane, but as we finish up lap number 1, swap arounds at the front. It will be Robert Malechka that leads from Christian Hildegard, Adam Blocker, Will Lyon, and Adam Crane, the rest of the top 5, with already a bit of separation starting to build through the field. Not much split in terms of strategies. Here's a look at what happened. This is on the start, in fact, for Seb Alexander and his Indy Alliance racing machine as we powered out of that bus stop chicane on the run in towards La Source. Of course, an uphill climb in towards La Source, and ooh, that just looked like he lost it before he even got into the braking zone. Just that initial stab on the brakes, Cam, unsettled the balance of the car.
Yeah, very close to that car in front as well, so maybe just not having the ideal line into that corner. As we get a change for lead already, Hildegard going to the front on the alternate tyres, and this is, of course, the battle that is potentially quite important due to the tyre strategies. If Hildegard wants to make these work, or make his strategy work, he needs to get into a position where he can gain a lot of time, and now that he's got the clear ahead of him, he should be able to do that. So if Malechka can stay close, though, that will still put him in a good stead when we get to that final stint.
Yeah, and I think we'll now see just how important the draft is going to be, but already down the hill through Huon, Hildegard has built up an 0.8 of a second advantage and has plenty of grip on his car, not even tracking out all the way to the curb that you see from a few of those machines behind. So now Mitch Welker, we'll see if we can figure out what happened to him in his own separate incident. It happened around here when they were working their way through the pit path down towards Stavelot and the curve Paul Frere and building on that run up towards Blanchimont. The gap at the front of the field already up and above 1 full second. We were talking about it before we went live, Andrew, but the last time you and myself were here at Spa with these cars, with these drivers, it was a lot of chaos at the start, and it did not get any less chaotic from there. I don't get the sense we're in for that sort of a race here today, though. Not
so much, I think, Arjuna, but at the same time, you look at the likes of Phil Kraus making his way through the field, Lorenzo Bonder starting to move up as well. Some of these really fast drivers did start towards the rear of this field, so that's really where the chaos can come into play here, because you do have these long straightaways and hard braking zones that invite people to sort of chuck it down the inside, and calamity can ensue if somebody makes a wrong move there.
Here is Mitch Welker in that All-American iRacers with Project 2 entry. There is running on the back of, I think that's Nico Jarva. He looked to the inside and was given enough racing room. A little bit of air between the two of them, and Mitch Welker almost had it saved until the right rear dug into the gravel and just spun him around, and unfortunately did lose just a little bit more time than he would have liked. Back to live pictures with 2 laps already now in the books. Hildegard not being allowed to run away. That gap has been brought back down to about 9/10 of a second. Both Hildegard and Malechka have run through 2 of their push-to-passes so far in this race. And of course, you get 10 allotments of a 70 horsepower additional burst. You're going to see most of the drivers use it on the run out of La Source, climbing towards the end of the Camel Straight. But we always do tend to see, Cam, 2 trains of thoughts. There's the Adam Blocker approach, which is don't use it at the start, save it for the end, usually when you already have won the race and you can just go for the fastest lap. And then there's the Yao Vaz approach, as we dubbed it, where he burnt through all 10 of his push-to-passes before we even got to the first pit stop of the race. It's all about compromises and figuring out what you need from the race.
Yeah, you got to find the most efficient way of using them, because if you use them now, you got to think, is that actually going to benefit me as it stands? That's why a lot of the drivers will be holding them back, because sometimes in these battles at this point of the race where maybe some tire saving going on, things like that, it is not important to use them. But when you get to those final couple of laps, and bear in mind there's 2 big straights around here, so you might need 2 doses in 1 lap. As again, Phil Krause there around the outside of the final chicane might be able to just make that work up the inside of the final corner, actually just not getting the best exit though. But as an example there, if he used that, if he used to push to pass there, coming into that bus stop chicane, he would have wasted it because he eventually didn't make the position.
Yes, no, and that's the other good point as well, is if you're going to use a push to pass, you want to try and make sure you get the most out of it and not just have to give up all the benefit that you've already gained. Hildegard at the front trying to use the push to pass as a tool to build a buffer. Sometimes we also call it push to defend at times as well, but you can see behind him the train is formed up all the way basically to Brian Carey, then about 1.5 seconds to Kevin Burrell in that Indy Alliance Racing number 4 machine. He's got a second sort of choo-choo train that is built behind him. Phil Krause has worked his way up 7 positions so far, but this is when it starts to get a little bit more difficult, when you get into the weeds of the race, and Krause already 7.5 seconds behind your race leaders here, Andrew.
Yeah, and fortunately, though, for Krause, he is basically still within that sort of draft train range. You did mention a little bit of a gap between Kevin Burrell and Brian Carey there, but at the same time, there is still that hint of the draft that Burrell will be getting from Brian Carey in front of him. So if Krause can get around the 5 and sort of bridge that gap, he's still certainly not out of this race.
Update, by the way, on lap number 1. Lorenzo Bonder is on blast here on RaceSpot TV. I said maybe Seb Alexander had his own issue. There was a tiny bit of air, but Lorenzo apparently has already apologized for the murdering of Seb Alexander, and so we're not going to allow that to go unnoticed, Cam. Murder from a RaceSpot TV commentator.
That's a funny way of putting it. But yes, of course, you never want to make a mistake, especially at turn 1 here. It's a very tight corner, and any little bits of sort of darting to left or right can always cause some issues. And fair play for owning up to it as well, especially during the driving as well. We've seen this a couple of times in recent races. Drivers like to, go in the live stream chat and say things while driving.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see Robert Malechka take one hand off the wheel to be typing during this race, but I would never say never. Lap time update, by the way. Fastest lap has been punched in by Christian Hildegard at the front with a 1:56.055, but last time by a 1:57.072. We're going to get to that point. It's the crossover point. We talk about it in Formula 1. We talk about it in IndyCar as well, Andrew, when the softer compound of tire that grips up more at the start of the race starts to give up the ghost, and the primaries start to become the preferred option.
And unfortunately for that number 8 of Hildegard, the tire just doesn't come back, does it, Arjuna? It just continues to go off the cliff further and further, and all you can do right now if you're Hildegard is manage that tire, use the long straightaways and the push to pass to your advantages. We see Phil Krause actually getting another spot up. He's already up to 8, so I think that's 2 spots this lap for Phil Krause.
I think Kevin Burrell may have had a bit of an issue because he went from being at the front of this train to at the back. Maybe a slowdown out of Eau Rouge and Radion is a possibility, but I'm not 100% sure. He's been able to funnel back into Lime, and now we see Jacob Reed trying to get to the inside of Rashad Craig, who was not going to take no for an answer there, and Craig does hold on, but this is the gaggle, which is very much biting hard, at least for the time being. It's built up that separation that at one point was 1.5 seconds between 6th and 7th to 2.9 seconds. So the draft has well and truly been broken, and Jacob Reed's going to continue going on the offense. Looks to the outside towards Blanchimont. It's a passing opportunity if you're brave, Cam, and not if you're smart, I'd say.
It's certainly the risky one, especially when you got this bus stop and going up the inside there, potentially all moving in the braking zone there. Reed just had to back out of that one as the number 6 car just made his point of where he was going to put that a little bit late now as we come up towards last source as well. Seeing Burrell also trying to get a bit interested, but for sure, Rochelle isn't necessarily the place where you want to make the move, even if you can, because you have such a long run up to the bus stop afterwards. That's really where you want to make your move under the brakes.
See the gap between Adam Blocker and Robert Malechka has dropped as well. Blocker's not going to be minding the situation too much, can preserve the tires, do a little bit of fuel saving as well, and even if he's not going to save a lap on the fuel strategy, just requires a little less fuel to be put into his car when we see the drivers dive their way down onto the pit lane about halfway through this race. There's Phil Kraus now up 10 positions into 8th with Nico Javer's similarly pink machine up the road in front of him, although Nico does have the benefit of pink wheels, which Phil Kraus maybe needs to take note of moving forward for future endeavors. One thing that I think is quite exciting for the drivers, Andrew, even though, of course, we are all very sad that the IndyCar will take a step back from focus, is that it gives the opportunity for some new endeavors and new collaborations. Of course, in 2022, an unexpected partnership was something that we saw. Phil Kraus and Adam Blocker working together to go and run in some V8 Supercars online races.
Yeah, it certainly does open up a number of different possibilities, particularly with some drivers who have a lot of respect for each other but might be on different teams, such as Blocker and Kraus. And there's been rumblings about some other collaborations going on, and we'll see what comes of that in the next few weeks here. But certainly one thing to keep in mind is while the IndyCar is taking a step back from a broadcast perspective, it is not taking a step back from a competition perspective. It will continue on as the US Open Wheel Series B, just simply not able to be broadcast anymore. But a number of these drivers have still stated their intention that they will continue running this series.
And of course, I think we can mention the fact that while we're very sad that the 2023 Lionheart IndyCar Series is not going to be live on RaceSpot TV, the drivers will still be out there competing every Wednesday night. And so hopefully there's a point in the year when we can flip back on to the airwaves, but some other exciting things to come in the world of Lionheart. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Robert Malechka with the push to pass and already down the inside of Hildegard. It's taken until lap 7, but have those alternate softer compound of tires started to wear just that little bit too much. Malechka in towards the end of the Kemmel Straight will lead from Hildegard, Blocker, Lyon, who have now broken away from Carey and Crane because Crane has been passed by the Powerslide Motorsports driver as his alternate compound tires start to give up the ghost cam.
Yeah, we definitely at this crossover period of the race, and I just wonder how long can the alternates go actually at this point. If they're already slower than the primaries, this is potentially not the best idea because they haven't really made use of the alternates in terms of the track position or anything like that. However, of course, the guys who will be on them at the end will then also have this slower period in the last couple of laps. So it's definitely one where you have to judge how you're going to do. So it maybe in the case of Hildegard, he's going to think if he can actually keep towards the front, keep that first, second position, that might actually still be beneficial if he can then use the slipstream to effectively pull his lap time quicker than what he would be due to the warm tyres.
Yes, at this point it's now about just sticking with those around you and not losing too much time in this next phase of the race. Towards Blanchimont they'll go and wind their way through. Of course, like Andrew mentioned, a lot of these teams that came into this race with several setups, one for warmer track conditions with maybe slightly more downforce, and then in cooler track conditions with slightly less downforce. Yes, that will help them, but the reality is as well, Andrew, that changes the balance of the car in some ways, and so you got to adapt to that challenge. Even though you have the setup prepared, you got to get your driving in the right place.
Yes, it certainly does add to the challenge, and you're right, even if you do like sort of match the downforce percentage between the different downforce levels, it changes how you drive the car because the car doesn't turn in quite as well if you're on a lower downforce setup. So you end up using the fronts a little bit more. Maybe then you need to change the balance a little bit in the pit stop. So there are all of these different calculations that these teams and drivers will have to go through with each of the permutations of the setup. And as you say, it just adds to the challenge and adds to the charm of the IndyCar Series.
Just did the quick back of the hand math. 70 liters of fuel is what these cars carry. Average fuel consumption probably around 5.5 liters. We're looking at about 12 laps in terms of stints, although I said maybe Adam Blocker wouldn't be thinking about saving a lap. If it's 12.7, I would not be shocked if Senor Blocker is thinking about trying to make this a 13-lap opening stint, just because he's been able to ride in the foot tracks, doesn't have to follow down 2 cars on what is a rather precarious pit entry, Cam. It's not something that we talk about that often at Spa, because people manage to make it look so simple, but that pit entry is definitely not as simple as we're going to make it sound.
There's a nice wall on the left and right-hand side of the track, and of course you have to keep it really tight after the first apex of the chicane as well. So it's certainly not one of the easier ones, especially if you're in a battle in close proximity to other cars around you. And as you say, with the refueling situation in this car, a lot of drivers may come into the pit at the same time on the same lap, so that can also be a factor. But look at Blocker here getting the run towards the bus stop chicane. We're getting Hilgard defending to the inside there and just trying to keep it the line. Is he going to go into the pit lane? Yes, he is, and that was good play because he managed to block off the gap, so he had a nice clean entry.
And so that's a guaranteed 2-stop then from Christian Hilgard, unless there is some magic fuel-saving technique that we are not wise to yet here on RaceSpot TV. So Hilgard becomes the first to dive his way to the lane. Adam Crane, counter to that, has elected to stay out. Andrew, again, commentator's math, never trust it, but is that a 2-stop or a 1-stop?
I think it's right on the edge of a 1-stop if I'm doing the math right. It should be 12 full laps from here, so I think he can do it. But at the same time, it's right at the beginning of the window. And as you mentioned with Adam Blocker, one of the other benefits of going long on this first stint, Arjuna, is that he's going to have less fuel in the car when he pits here. That means that he's going to have less weight in the car. That means that he's going to use less energy through the tires on his red stint, which in turn means that those reds are going to last longer. So I definitely think Adam Blocker is going to try and stick this out as long as possible on those black tires.
See, this is why I said never trust a commentator's math, because you say 12 full laps, I say 13 full laps.
Regardless, I believe 13 was the number that Adam Blocker said he could do. So if Adam Blocker can do that, then Hildegaard, in theory, should be able to do it as well. If he can pull it off is a different story.
Yes, again, 12.7 to 13 laps is not that hard a challenge. You're lifting off into a couple of quarters here and there. And of course, with this IndyCar, the update that we had midway through 2021, fuel maps are also a thing that can be played with, so maybe bump it down into fuel map 2 for portions of the race. 3 cars then. Still running at the front, yet to pit. Malechka, Blocker, Line now have a 2.6-second buffer over Brian Carey. And this is that danger of losing out through these split strategies, Cam, is that Brian Carey was part of this main pack, but once Adam Crane started having his issues with tires, as Crane now dives down to the pit lane, Carey is separated from the rest of the leaders, and it's very hard to make up 2.5 seconds in a field as strong as this.
Yeah, losing the slipstream around a track like this is almost as bad as losing it on a speedway as well. It's so beneficial to your race, so for sure for the likes of Carey. That's going to be a difficult one to come back from as well. And that is why we like people in some ways doing the alternate strategies, because they can have a big effect on this race. As we've seen a few more drivers like Bonda coming into the pit lane as well. So sometimes, yeah, trying something different can just open up the doors, not just for yourself, but for other drivers in the race. And that is something that, as a driver, you can't really plan for. You can plan for yourself, but you can't plan for other people and where you are going to filter in with their strategies as well.
Down through Cells, Rivage, we don't know, through No Name, Jackie X, we don't know. Corner names here at Spa-Francorchamps, always a big hot topic debate. Is this Pouon? Is it the double gauche? That's 3 corners in a row that I've just named 2 different variations of names that you can pick for them. I'll put it this way to you though, Andrew. Would you rather have multiple corner names for a track, or would you rather have the absurd corner numberings that we do have throughout the world?
I know where you're going with this, and it's Road America, and those aren't corner numbers, they're station numbers.
I know, because you were going to bring that up. I was going to go to the Red Bull ring instead.
Can we just say that people need to pick a name or a number and stick to it, and that is the bottom line here, Arjun.
Yes, and I'm also going to say 10A, 10B, 10C, these are not corner numbers. These are made-up constructs that we've got in the world of motorsports. Almost halfway through this race, the final one in 2022 on a road course for many of these drivers as they power up out of the final corner. I say road course specifically because about 24 hours from now, we'll be wrapping up the RaceSpot US 500. 2 splits of almost 43 drivers going to be headed out to the Michigan International Speedway, as Christian Hildegard trying to work his way back up through the field. 14th position for the time being, and like we said, does have to be a little bit conscious of the fuel. Andrew is going to be part of our field tomorrow in the quote-unquote top split of the US 500, but a great way for us to be able to say goodbye, at least for now, to this Dallara IR18, and we do it in partnership with the Open Medicine Foundation. You can head over to our US 500 and you can contribute directly through YouTube via their YouTube giving. All the money, 100% of the money goes directly to OMF, with the transaction fee being paid by YouTube. So end of the year, if you're feeling in the giving mood, whatever little you can give, it will very much make a difference. I'm just being told that in pit lane mistakes, Lorenzo Bonder has had another fumble here today, as he has been apparently dinged for speeding, Cam. And let's not forget, this car does have a pit speed limiter.
It certainly does, and apparently speedy on the exit as well, which is, of course, one thing that we were discussing last week, how obviously speeding on the exit is quite bad because you do therefore have to come back in. And around here, actually, that is a bit of a weird one, because pit exit is right by basically the hairpin of the inside of turn 1. So you don't necessarily need to press it early, because you have to brake to go around the hairpin and go slower than the pit speed limit. So it's certainly an interesting one to get a pit exit violation around here. Maybe wheel spin out of the box, who knows? But certainly an awkward one, with it being quite a fairly long pit lane. And as you see, still in the pit lane, and now the leaders, Malechka, coming around to start another lap of racing. And of course, we are going to start seeing some pit stops, I would assume, at the end of this lap.
Oh no, apparently we've thrown Lorenzo under the bus for a pit speed exit violation. Instead, it was just because he crashed.
Oh no.
We'll see if we could take a look at a replay at some point in time. Of course, on to lap 12. This is what we expected from those at the front. Minimize the amount of time they'll spend on those alternate softer compound of tires. 7 laps or so seems to be that crossover point. And this is going to be into Blanchimont, and this is going to be a high-speed one. He clips the inside curb, and around she goes. I tell you what, I'm surprised there wasn't more damage on that car, Andrew.
Well, it just goes to show you that he doesn't need Brandon Train in order to wreck near Blanchimont.
Oh, shots fired the way of Lorenzo Bonder. Yes. And he did also, by the way, have a pit limit violation. So both of them were correct in this case.
Amazing scenes there for Bonder. And that is also a weird one to hit the inside curb of Blanchimont. Maybe just having a little bit more grip with the fresher tyres there on the outlap potentially, because that is certainly a weird place. You don't really want to touch the inside curb because it's such a high-speed corner. You want to keep the car nice and settled through that point of the lap, but certainly maybe trying a different line. But the guys trying something different potentially is going to be the way of Malechka and Blocker, because we're saying Blocker might be going a lap longer to 13. Will Malechka try that as well, or will he be coming in to go to those alternate tyres?
Not sure where we're going to see Adam Crane cycle out, by the way. He's been punching in some pretty potent lap times. 156.591 last time by, his fastest of the race. Going to be able to close the gap to these drivers at the front. Blocker and Lyon able to extend an additional lap compared to Robert Malechka. It will make their lives that much easier come the end of the race. Kraus, even with the charge, able to go 13 laps as well. Ooh, Andrew, this is shaping up for an exciting finish at the end.
It absolutely is, Arjuna, and I'd like to highlight Will Lyon in there because we haven't really talked about him, but if I do recall correctly, Spa was one of the tracks where Will Lyon sort of announced his arrival onto the IndyCar scene with authority. He had a really strong race here back a couple of seasons ago, last time the IndyCars joined here, so the fact that he's only a half second back of Adam Blocker and going the same number of laps on fuel, that's going to be some shots fired across the bow of that #1 car.
So Robert Malechka about 3 seconds in front of Hildegard on the exit of pit lane. Of course, he's still got to fire these tires up and get them up to temperature, but Hildegard has some work to do on top of the fuel saving that we, of course, expect out of him. 8.2 seconds stationary, though, for Robert Malechka compares to 9 seconds stationary for his teammate Brian Carey. So maybe Malechka had been doing just a little bit of fuel saving, not as much as Blocker Lyon were able to do. You are right, Will Lyon, someone that we saw sparingly on Monday nights. Of course, being over in Europe, it's hard to race at, what was it, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning for Will through most of the summer. But after joining up with this Indy Alliance racing program, someone that I first encountered in an LMP1 car, I think something that Will Lyon will still maintain was a golden era of not just sports car racing, but endurance racing here on iRacing. Made the transition over to this IndyCar, and I think one of those that only fell in love with this car because of his time on iRacing. Here comes Blocker and Lyon, then onto the tricky pit entry. They navigate their way through without smashing into the walls, and now we'll see where they fare out in comparison to Robert Malechka. Again, 8.2, the magic number for that number 16 machine in terms of time stationary on the pit lane. Blocker and Lyon have just about reached their box and have gone up on the jacks for some fuel, Firestone tires as well. Malechka's already on the run into turn number 1. Blocker and Lyon, 8 seconds stationary, but it is going to be a bit of an advantage for the number 16 down the hill and using the push-to-pass to build it up. He'll break clear of the drafting range, and Robert Malechka leads by over 2 seconds as they rise through Eau Rouge and Raidillon, Cam.
And also, he's got the warm tyres as well, so he's going to be able to potentially put another couple of tenths over the course of the next few corners, so that is quite a big gap. So he's potentially between Lyon and Blocker for this second place as it stands. Lyon goes now towards the outside of Les Combes, making Blocker defend just a little bit. Over 2 seconds now is the gap towards the front. They've got some work to do, but of course they've got a lap fresher tyres, so how will that fare them in the final 2 or 3 laps?
Harry and Hildegard, they'll fight for 4th and 5th positions. Kraus and Crane likely to fight for 6th, 7th, with Yarva Burrell and maybe even Jacob Reed in the mix as well. Will Lyon taking liberties once again down through the no-name corner. Curious how many of these drivers will be wondering about track limits infringements. However, Spa now a little bit more lenient than it has been in recent memories, of course, with that partnership with the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team. We got the initial tightening of track limits that we had for the Spa 24 loosened back up so that drivers can be a little bit more lenient with their liberties around the track. See exactly how much they are taking as Yarva dips the right side of his tires into the gravel on the exit of the pit path. Blocker now only 1.6 back, and the other thing to remember here is I called it the Adam Blocker strategy, where he tried to wait till the end of the race to use his push-to-passes to get the fastest lap. But at the end of the day, Andrew, Adam Blocker will use his push-to-passes to close the gap to Malechka. He's got 9 left to use compared to 5 for your race leader. Not insignificant with many laps still left to play.
Although I will say, I do think with the draft that Blocker will have from Robert Malechka, I think he will end up with the fastest lap regardless because of these push-to-pass laps. But you're right, this didn't quite go exactly how Blocker wanted, I think, through that pit cycle. It's a little bit farther of a gap to his teammate than he was hoping for. That being said, he does have the 1 lap fresher tires and the 1 lap less fuel, which over the course of this stint, I think will make a big difference. The question will be, is Robert Malechka just that little bit far enough away to, in order to hold him off? But I think Blocker took off almost a half second on that 1 straightaway alone coming up to Les Combes.
Yeah, he is definitely charging. Nico Yarva sees Kevin Burrell down the inside at the end of the Kemmel Straight, and Burrell's going to give him space and try and fight this one back through Malmedy potentially, but Yarva getting a little bit sideways. Lost a bit of traction and ground to Adam Crane up the road. Phil Kraus has already cleared off of this battle, by the way, trying to hold on to the 6th position and charge forward to 5th, where Christian Hildegard is going to start sliding backwards, already 6 laps into his run on his primary compound of tire. And of course, having to save just that little bit of fuel as well. Gap at the front, by the way, down to under a second between the top 3 cars. It'll be between Malechka, Blocker, and Lyon, but with 2 of the cars having a little bit more of a advantage compared to Robert Malechka. I'm quite amazed at Will Lyon's reluctance and patience in push-to-pass usage, Cam. He's still got all 10 of his push-to-passes left to use in this race.
I think he's waiting for an opportunity. That might be with these two batting up towards the bus stop chicane. Just a bit of a look there for Blocker, trying to put Molechka off. It actually worked. Molechka not having the best line through that final chicane up towards La Source. Now to start the next lap of this race, lap 16 will be going on to. And Blocker now looking towards the inside of La Source. He's going to look there, but not quite, sort of half thinking about it maybe. And here comes Line. Maybe choose one of his push passes as we go down towards Eau Rouge.
And Adam Blocker has decided to use one of his push-to-passes. I think he went a little bit too early, if anything there. You are now going to be giving the double toe to both the cars behind you. Molechka, another one on the push-to-pass. Will Line still reluctant to use his yet, waiting till the end of this race. Side by side for the moment. Will Line does not choose to make it 3 wide. Now they're 3 wide for a moment. Molechka around the outside will regain the race lead. But with 6 laps to go, Molechka makes a mistake, bobbles on the entry to Malmedy. He'll slide backwards to third, will try and regather his composure. But my word, what a fight they are building up to.
That was the old tires happening there, Arjuna. Molechka's tires are just a little bit worse than either Lions or Blockers, and I think he just got into the chicane there just a little bit too hot. Meanwhile, we had a little bit of action. Phil Krause has gotten around Christian Hildegard for 5th place.
Yeah, Hildegard, I think, really starting to struggle now. He's doing 157s compared to 155s from Phil Krause, who did a 155, 125 last time by. Not the fastest car on track, though. That is Will Line with a 155, 104. I was kind of wondering if the reluctance on push-to-pass was related to any sort of top speed difference and downforce configuration difference, but he seems to have just as little downforce and is just as slippery as Adam Blocker is for the time being. And I think the two at the front now will be those putting on a show. Molechka just that little bit too far behind and has got to make sure he can get to the end of this race with all 4 tires still underneath him. Up through the bus stop, you can see just how close Will Line is going to get. This last time by for these drivers, to give you an indication of how much time they'll bleed while fighting, they went from 155s to 157s. 2 seconds lost, Cam, through what was 3 corners of fighting.
Yeah, this track's all about the flow and momentum, especially through turn 1, where they're going side by side. Is almost a game of cat and mouse. Who wants to lead or get the slipstream up this straight? And of course, you just use the momentum for 2 kilometers as we now get Line all the top 3 on the push to pass, side by side up towards the Les Comps chicane. Line gets the lead, but will he be able to outbrake himself and all the way around the outside? Yes, he just about can. Blocker's going to have to fold into 2nd place there, 2 tenths between them. A bit of a slide there on the exit, though. Line is starting to push, and is this going to be potentially a run towards the front, or is this battle going to continue? Looks like it just is, as Blocker starts to have another look again.
Yeah, I don't think this battle is done by any means. The question is who prevails come the end of this race. Crane and Yarva, by the way, 7th and 8th positions, have lost now over 6 seconds up the road to Phil Krause, who was well and truly on a charge. And, well, you can kind of see why. Down through the right-hand sweeper, Kevin Burrell, rear end stepping out of it on him as he tries to work his way past Jacob Reed. He's going to be squeezed to the exit of Jackie Ick's corner, and now defends as his teammate Jesper Orman will try and slide down the inside in towards Pouon. The blue and gold does manage to get his way on through. Kevin Burrell at one point fighting up inside of that top 10. Now trying to hold on to his spot in the top 10. Will Line now trying to use the push to pass not as an offensive tool, as a defensive tool. He uses it on the run up through Blanchimont, which, let's be real, Andrew, all he's really doing is towing Blocker around.
Yes, but this is why he's saved these push-to-passes, is now because he has so many left, he's able to use them as the defensive tool, not just on 1 straightaway, but on 2 straightaways per lap here. And the fact that he was able to get around Blocker, I do think that Will Line maybe has just a little bit less downforce than the power slide setup right now, because I think Blocker is better through that middle portion of the run, but the beginning and the middle, or the beginning and the end stint, I think that Will Line has the advantage, and it's going to be very difficult for Adam Blocker to get back around that number 2 car.
Tower will light up like a Christmas tree once again as we continue to run through these final stages. The entirety of the top 5 on the button right now. Will Line able to jink back and forth and hold Blocker at bay, and if what Andrew is saying holds true, then we are going to have to see the move come during the middle part of the lap. Aggressive sends potentially on the cards from Adam Blocker. Phil Krause not able to get past Brian Carey as they worked in towards the Les Comps chicane. Meanwhile, Nico Yarva defends from Jacob Reed as Kevin Burrell slide backwards continue. Now his other teammate, Rashad Craig, able to work his way on through. Kevin Burrell just really not feeling the balance of the car, and he had kind of complained about that after his Monday night race as well. Of course, the first race of the iRacing week, and well, unfortunately, the balance hasn't got much better as they've built over the last few days, Cam.
Yes, struggling a little bit, but it's just crazy how close these races can be with just how it's worked out. We've had 18, or we had 17 on lap 18 of this race. We've got 9 seconds covering the top 6, and then 4 seconds covering from 7th down to 13th place. So amazing to see just how close these drivers can be, just showing you how the slipstream works around here and how everyone is just really using it to their advantage to keep in these packs. Lyon once again using his push to pass up towards the bus stop chicane as he did on the previous lap. Of course, it doesn't really pull him away, but it does stop potentially a fight, as we're getting a fight itself with Philip Kraus trying to get on the outside there of the bus stop chicane up into 4th place. If he can hold it all the way around the outside, this is a great comeback from Kraus out of the final corner, gets that place nicely.
And now Hildegard's going to be, I think, quite happy with this. His tires maybe will come back to him as the alternates go off of Brian Carey and Phil Kraus, and Carey will lose 2 positions in 2 corners as now Hildegard back up into the top 5. Front of the field, it's 2 cars fighting. Malechka has lost the track of your 2 race leaders in no man's land by himself with 3 laps still left to go. Walker not able to get close enough to have a challenge at the end of the Kemmel Straight, but down through Eau Rouge and up through Radion. Will we see any more surprises? Brian Carey peeks to the inside of Hildegard, who gets boxed in by Philip Kraus. Carey back up 1 position, not up 2 though for the time being. Meanwhile, Jacob Reed trying to hold off Nico Yarva and potentially Jesper Orman as well, as the Swede looks around the outside and then has to think better of that one. Able to get past Yarva, not able to get Jacob Reed, and up to 8th as well. 3 laps to go, Andrew, and we talked about tires so much in this race, but for everyone now, they will be feeling the pain.
Absolutely. The drivers on the red alternates, they'll be feeling it the most, but the black tires, they're coming to the end of their life as well. So it's all coming down to a knockdown, drag-out battle, and we've got it throughout the top 10 right now. But this is the one we're focusing on. Will Lyon versus Adam Blocker for the win.
And it's almost equalized on push-to-pass usage. It's equalized now as Will Lyon gets back on the button. 4 usages left through 2 laps. How do you play it? Of course, 1 out of La Source on each of the laps. That's to be expected. Will Lyon likes it out of Stavelot on the run towards Blanchimont. Blocker may be thinking about springing it in the middle of the lap and maybe trying it through Pouon if he really wants to be brave. 2 to go then this time by. Check back in with Brian Carey as he tries to defend from Christian Hildegard. Started up this race up in 2nd. As Phil Kraus now pulls away, albeit slightly, 1 and a bit odd seconds as they cross the line once again. It's been a great recovery drive from Kraus after failing to set a lap time in qualifying, but the question will be, what if there had been that lap time? Once again, everyone is on the button. The question will be, can Blocker close up enough to throw a lunge, or does Will Lyon just have that little bit more top-end grunt to be able to hold off once again? You can just see, Cam, visually how Blocker struggles to close the further down the Kemmel you go.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like Lyon's got a bit of an advantage there, as we're saying, on that top speed side of things. But of course, this middle sector could be where it all comes down to play. But there's still plenty of positions up for grabs. Again, Jacob Reed defending. Orman on his outside, side by side in the braking zone. Space given, but Orman has to back out like he did on the previous lap. But Yarva is very close indeed if these two start to come together. But Reed always has a good exit there out of that Malmedy section of corners. Always gets a couple of car lengths, which always does well with defending around this middle sector, gets a little bit of an advantage.
Hildegard pressuring Carey on the run down towards Pouon. Here's your race leaders through the piff path, and this is where Blocker just does seem to be that little bit better. You can see Lyon a little bit spooked potentially as they work their way through, and now out of the curve pull Fred, both drivers getting on the push to pass this time by. Is Adam Blocker going to try something into the final corner? Is he going to be close enough this time around? 1 final lap to go after this, and 2 cars left to duke it out. Lyon covers the inside, forces Blocker the long way around. He'll give enough room, and Blocker will stick his nose in. He'll take the lead, provisionally coming to the white flag, but still side by side on the run up towards La Source, with Will Lyon holding the inside this time around. One more lap, Lyon versus Blocker. Which one will roar to the top? Down the hill out of La Source, this is where Blocker will feel the pressure can.
Certainly will. Let's see what happens. Side by side, almost as we come towards Eau Rouge. This is where the slipstream is going to be so crucial. Up over the hill. Line already on the push pass. Blocker now saving it as late as he can. Is he too close, though, to get a run up towards Les Combes chicane? This is going to be the important factor. Side by side, still one potential braking zone to do after this race. But he knows if he gets ahead, he'll be able to lead through that middle chicane.
13, 14 cars on the push to pass on the final lap of this race, but Blocker not close enough. I think it will come down to that run through the bus stop one more time. Meanwhile, 3 wide on the run down in towards Les Combes. Reed, Orman, and Yarva. Which one prevails? Yarva the deepest and most committed on the brakes, but sweeping around the outside. Jacob Reed will try and hold it through Malmedy. A bit of contact between Yarva and the yellow machine for Reed. It's Yarva that grabs 8th for the time being, with still 6 cars fighting their way through. And what a recovery from Mitch Welker. Down and out on lap number 1, back up to 13th with half a lap still to go. But here at the front, Andrew, they come towards the final sequence of corners and that run back towards the bus stop.
What a race we've been seeing here, Arjun. What a show these IndyCar drivers or American Open Wheel B drivers are putting on here today. But this is it. This is what it comes down to. Adam Blocker versus Will Lyon. One last time through Blanchimont. Who's going to come out on top here?
Well, Blocker wants to get it done in towards Blanchimont. That's a little bit too brave if you ask me. Will Lyon gets a snap of oversteer and slides his way wide off the track. Has it come down to one moment of bravery from Adam Blocker? Will Lyon can do nothing but watch as, powering out of the final corner, as he did 21 laps ago, Adam Blocker first across the line to grab the victory for the US Open Wheel B IndyCar Series in their send-off at Spa-Francorchamps for Friday night primetime. My word, what a race we had till the very, very end. Will Lyon and Adam Blocker knew it would be a fight. It was into Blanchimont that it ended up being settled. Further back, Nico Yarva leads that train across the line in the 8th position, but my, oh my. These drivers know how to put on a show. They know this may be their final send-off on a road course, and Cam, did they live up to their expectations?
Oh, they certainly did. Look at some of these gaps. Half a second between 1 and 2. Just a 10th between Kraus and Hilgard for 4th and 5th place. And then 8th all the way down to 13th. Just 2 seconds at the line as well. Some big battles going on at the end of this race. What a way to finish the year. And of course, with this car as well. Can't wait to see how that's going to be wrapped up tomorrow. But here at Spa-Francorchamps, 21 laps ended with some great action.
Yeah, here's a look at those race results. Half a second the margin at the end, but it will come down to the moment through Blanchimont that Will Lyon had snapping loose. Half a second, what it says on the timesheet. Robert Malechka rounds out the podium after leading part of this race. Slightly compromised on strategy, but able to grab that final spot. Phil Kraus charging through the field, 14 positions gained in front of Christian Hildegard, who started up in second. Brian Carey, Adam Crane, Nico Yarva, Jacob Reed, and then Rashad Craig, the rest of the top 10. Down in 11th and only about 800ths off of a top 10 spot. Jesper Orman finishes in 11th in front of his teammate Kevin Burrell, with Mitch Welker, Andrew Marquez, and Chris Wilhite through the top 15. Zachary Hubler and then Olivia Hayward 16th and 17th, with RaceSpot's own Lorenzo Bonder, responsible for the murdering of Seb Alexander, finishing in 18th in front of that number 18 machine. We'll give them a couple of moments and hope to get some post-race interviews with our podium before we wrap things up. But Andrew, I'll come on over to you. We'll see you tomorrow racing in that RaceSpot US 500. But like I said at the start, much like myself, your commentary journey started because of the series, because of the cars, these cars, and because of these drivers. It feels very weird heading into the next year knowing it won't be the same.
It certainly does, Arjuna, but I think the race that we saw here today, this exemplifies why I fell in love with the IndyCar and these cars in general, why I started racing them, why I started commentating them. You had so much action, you had such close racing, so much respect between the drivers and the community members. It was just a pleasure to watch, and it just exemplifies the type of experience that we've had here on iRacing. So it'll be weird that we won't be able to broadcast this experience going forward, but hopefully some sort of an agreement will come together that will allow us some time in the future to do this again, because that was just a fantastic way to send this off here on RaceSpot Primetime.
Give a couple more moments and hopefully get Adam Blocker, Will Lyon and Robert Malechka in for a quick chat. But let's talk about what we've got coming up next week. Of course, we'll be over in 2023. 6th of January will be our next Friday night primetime. And, well, feels a little bit weird that we'll be heading to Indianapolis, but not with these cars, with the 3 classes of the IMSA iRacing Series, that BMW MV8 Hybrid, the Dallara LMP2 car, and then a bevy of GT3 cars. Cam, it's going to be a fun one, that's for sure, and you'll be alongside with Zach Sweeney for all the fun.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Great series in general, and of course with the BMW, even better addition at the just a couple of weeks ago at the latest build as well. So looking forward to that one. The Indy Road Course is a very tricky one on its own, let alone with 3 classes of racing. So that should be some good fun. And of course, all the action coming your way in just a week's time as we head into 2023.
Well, I think we do have Adam Blocker standing by, so let's head down to Victory Lane. And Adam, well, it's not beat around the bush. Final lap of the race, you decide to go for it in towards Blanchimont. What a way to get it done, but what an interesting race you had as well. Talk to us about this final send-off on the road courses.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I don't think you could ask for much better of a race. I mean, there were 4 legitimate leaders, and yeah, I knew, so Rob didn't save enough fuel to go the extra lap on black, so I knew that was going to cost him, but we had an interesting battle there getting past him, and yeah, I knew Will just had so much top speed. I think he was on like the 32 rear wing, and I had more downforce, and so I couldn't get close enough to pass him into Lake Home, but I was always getting a really good runs out of Stavelo after the infield section, so yeah, the second to last lap, I was hoping to make the outside of the bus stop stick, and I kind of did, but and so I knew that would be my move for the last lap. But yeah, I got there earlier, so I got down the inside into Blanchimont, and with how worn both of our tires were, I mean, he almost crashed, and I had to lift too just to hold the inside. So it was a pretty hairy moment.
Let's talk about some of your plans for next year. I don't think we've had the chance to talk about it on RaceSpot TV just yet, but after 2 years working in the NTT IndyCar Series paddock as part of the Chevy engine program, you've got a new team that you'll be working for next year. How excited are you to join up with Team Penske and Joseph Newgarden and to head into another year of competition?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. Obviously, it'll be very similar to what I have been doing, but yeah, just on a little bit different environment, more pressure and all that. So yeah, definitely looking forward to it, and yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting year. So.
In terms of what does 2023 hold in store for you, I know you are still planning on running the Lionheart IndyCar Series, albeit off of RaceSpot TV. What other plans do you have moving forward, though, for some sim racing competition?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I want to do the special events that I can, and obviously want to stay involved in the IndyCar community. Hopefully we get broadcast back eventually. And yeah, then also looking at potentially doing some more sports car stuff, like Lionheart decided to, I guess, start a league with it, so I might do some of those races, but we'll see. And yeah, definitely, you know, just, yeah, hopefully we get the rights and everything back to IndyCar, because ultimately that's what I really like driving, though. There's no really other car like it, just racing road and oval, and just the community itself is united and very clean, so it's kind of unique in the iRacing community.
Well, great win today, Adam, and a fun fight all the way to the very end. We'll see you tomorrow for the RaceSpot US 500, but congratulations on your victory here today.
Yeah, see you guys there, and thanks to all the PowerSlide guys for working on the setup, and yeah, thanks for you guys for covering the race.
That was Adam Blocker. We'll head on over to his teammate, Robert Malechka, who finished this race in 3rd. Rob, another amazing run in qualifying for you. Some great race speed. I think it all came down to not being able to save some fuel and go that one extra lap.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I kind of choked my my Q lap. I was on Adam's set, and then I'm like, I can't drive this, so I stopped mid-lap and went onto Brian's, and that kind of got me a decent lap in there. But yeah, race went pretty well. I mean, at least in what we were talking about, that seems like one of the best fixed races that we've kind of put on for, you know, in a little bit of time. So hopefully look good on the broadcast. But yeah, I was kind of in that no man's land of, you know, I could save the fuel, but I would be running out into pit road. So I would just kind of lose the time anyway. So decided just to pit the 1 lap early, and yeah, you know, was going okay there. And then when we were kind of all playing the mind games, going down the Kemmel Straight, just had a massive slide into Lacombs, and that was kind of my race done.
We mentioned, both Andrew and myself at the start, that you've had this remarkable increase in consistency and speed on the road course since you joined up with Powerslide Motorsports. But what's been your biggest highlight of 2022 as you look back on the year? So many different series that you've run in this IndyCar. What's the highlight? What stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, for road, I mean, obviously I've made some pretty solid gains. Not as much on the red tire as I would like, but roadside, I would say Phillip Island, you know, had great pace in there in the Lionheart series, and that kind of gave me confidence that, you know, I could hang up there with, you know, Phil and Connor and Adam and Brian and everyone else that kind of runs up front there. But I think on the oval side, just every kind of 2-mile track that we ran at, like, seemed like every race at Pocono and Michigan and Fontana on the broadcast, and we always put on a really good race, and hopefully that help gain interest for people to run this series.
Of course, Michigan up next tomorrow for our RaceSpot US 500. What are you expecting? Are we going to see more 4 and 5 wide and grab the victory by 1,000th instead of the other way around?
Yeah, that'd be nice. Honestly, I just hope, you know, everyone kind of rides for the first half of the race, because we don't want to have guys that deserve to be up there contending for the win out because of someone else's error. So hopefully, you know, we're all kind of patient the first 100 laps or so, and then once we get to the last, you know, 2-3 stops, we can start racing through there. But yeah, I'm sure, you know, 4 or 5. I'm not sure if we can squeeze in 6 wide, but I'm sure we'll try coming to the line.
I'm sure you'll find a way. Congratulations on a great year, Robert, and we'll see you tomorrow to close it out.
Yep, thank you, Arjun.
Robert Malechka bringing up our post-race interviews to a close, and it's time to wrap things up then for Friday Night Primetime in 2022. Cam, you've been around for a lot of Friday Night Primetime this year, including that interesting experience that we had last season, jumping across from different series week after week. It's just a great way for us to jump with our community around the sim racing universe and see exactly what sort of racing so many different communities can put on.
Yeah, it's a great way of finding something different as well. There's so many different categories of racing on iRacing, and to be able to go into those and see how they race and see different drivers even jump across to those over the course of the year, we've done probably about 15 or 20 different series. It's been a great way to open my eyes as well. Being sort of this really being my first year on the iRacing side of things from the broadcast as well. So yeah, it's been great to see that, and hopefully we can continue and start off with IMSA in 2023. Looking forward to that, and hopefully we can have some nice racing there as well.
Yeah, and just a reminder of where we're going, 6th of January to kick off Friday Night Primetime. This time on IMSA competitions, we head maybe somewhat weirdly to Indianapolis, this time with 3 classes of competition, and of course that new road course, Andrew, that was added just a handful of months ago.
And it should be a really exciting round. Again, because it's a new road course, a little bit of a different challenge for these drivers than they're used to. So a little bit different setup options, a little bit of different things that they can do. So very excited to see what happens as we move into the IMSA series here.
So that will, of course, be in 2023. But don't forget tomorrow, one final send-off. Join us 2:30 p.m. Eastern for the RaceSpot US 500 as 42 of the best in IndyCar go battling in the top split. Another 42 drivers featured in our second split as well. That all live on RaceSpot TV. For now, though, we bid you farewell for 2022. For everyone at RaceSpot TV, for our production team behind the scenes, Iku Maricalo on the buttons today, Cam Roger and Andrew Kinsella alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati. We'll see you in 2023 for more amazing Friday Night Primetime. We thank you, our community, for coming along with us for the journey, for picking where we've been focusing our attention on, and we'll do it again next year. Happy holidays to you and yours. We'll see you in 2023.